Oh hey, what's happening everybody out there? I'm Jakejames Lugo and welcome to the channel. So let's finally talk about Final Fantasy 15. Now there's a very long story about the development of Final Fantasy 15, which was originally known as Versus 13 back in the day. I followed this game all throughout its development process, but we're not going to focus so much on its development as much as we're going to focus on what exactly we got in the final product, that is the game. So I figured I'd dress for the occasion, look as good as Noctis Lucius does, and let's talk about this epic game. This is Final Fantasy 15.
Final Fantasy 15 is the 15th entry of the long-running RPG franchise. It tells the story of Noctis Lucius, a young prince who's set to wed his childhood friend, an oracle from another kingdom outside of his kingdom of Lucius. However, things go awry and both he and his close friends and royal guard are thrust into an adventure that will cause him to fulfill his destiny and save the world of Eos from darkness. It's a story about brotherhood and friendship, as much as it's a tale of fantasy and magic. In a new twist, the game takes place in a more modern-day setting, which is a great change of pace from the steampunk and old-school fantasy worlds of previous Final Fantasy games.
Now the thing about Final Fantasy 15 is that it's the most divisive of the entire series. A lot of people that have followed this game ever since the beginning of its development have felt one way or another, and while some wish that it was still called Versus 13, there is a large majority of people that are glad that this is the next numbered entry in the Fabled series. A lot of people felt one way or another about it being a more modern take on the story included in the Final Fantasy universe, which has traditionally focused more on fantasy and kind of more of a steampunk era type of style. For me personally, I love this modern take on a Final Fantasy game. I think that it's very relatable now in this day and age, where not only do they have cell phones, they have modern technology, but it still has that same flair and charm that you find from some of the classic entries in the Fabled series. Now, one of the things that makes this story very good is all the different character development that happens for the entire cast of the story.
The characters in this story are really interesting. Noctis is the central character that we control, and we experience all the important events through his eyes. But we also come across a cast of other great characters, each with their own stories and intriguing personalities that will quickly grow on you. Your party is made up of Gladiolus, Ignis, and Prompto, the three royal guards and Noctis' best friends since his childhood. It's the dynamic between these four that drive this game forward, not just the good versus evil story or the epic action moments. What stood out to me more than anything else in Final Fantasy 15 is how much we grew to love these characters being together, through the good and the funny moments, as well as also the sad ones as well.
One of the other cool things about this is that this is more of a Final Fantasy story that doesn't harken on a lot of the tropes from previous games in the series. Granted, there is still staples that you find from throughout the series and a lot of different nuanced stuff that you find in traditional storytelling. Now, the thing that makes this Final Fantasy game really stick out in the comparison to the rest of the series is its take on the gameplay. Unlike previous Final Fantasy games that use either an active battle time system or a turn-based system, this one opts to use more of a real-time battle system, very similar to the Kingdom Hearts series.
The real-time battles of Final Fantasy 15 are a welcome change for the series. I felt like I had more control over what I could do for even the toughest of fights. However, in exchange for this, things are a bit more streamlined than previous Final Fantasy games. There's still an element of strategy in some fights, but most of the time you're going to be hitting one button to smash anything in your way. You do level up from gaining experience defeating enemies, and you can change your loadout of royal arms to increase your strength in battle. To keep things fresh, you have various equipment and magic you can equip in later portions of the game, as well as unique abilities and team attacks that you can utilize with the whole group, which deals definitely big damage. The fights can be intense regardless, especially the bigger boss fights in certain portions of the story. At the same time, the moments when you're out in the world exploring and not fighting anything can be just as interesting. There's a whole lot to do and see in the world of Eos, which is great for those that love big areas in their RPGs, and the best part is that all of it is very pretty to look at.
There's all these little different elements that harken back to older entries of Final Fantasy, while also introducing new elements to the series that have never really been introduced before. And while the game itself is not necessarily difficult, there is plenty to do and you're going to be really busy over like nearly 50 plus hours in this game. That's if you decide to do everything and not just stick with the main story. What I think is also really cool that should be mentioned is how big the world is. You have a bunch of different regions to go explore, and even though in the beginning of the game you're kind of limited to where exactly you could go, but it plays into the greater narrative of what's going on. And that's one other thing I want to mention about Final Fantasy 15. In traditional Square Enix fashion, this game looks absolutely beautiful. The visuals are on par with some of the best games that are out there. There's a lot of shine and polish and plenty of little details all over the place, even for the littlest and the simplest of things. all the way down to the clothing, to the jewelry, to the visual effects from the different magic stuff that you could use, and even the monsters that you encounter in various different points of the game all look phenomenal. But even more so than that, besides the visuals, besides the gameplay, we have to talk about something that's almost a staple of the entire Final Fantasy franchise, and that's the music.
The soundtrack of Final Fantasy XV is amazing. I love listening to the music of Final Fantasy games, and luckily for me, there's a whole lot to enjoy here. Whether you're witnessing the story play out, cruising around with the guys in the car, or hanging around a chocobo ranch, you'll definitely dig the music here as well. What you hear is just as awe-inspiring as what you see. And the best part is that the music complements so much of what is happening on screen. When it needs to be epic, it does so with all the right notes. And yet, when the music needs to be calm and heartfelt, it gives you some great tunes that will tug at your heartstrings. Some of my favorite tracks come from the battles, since they're usually the ones you'll probably hear the most. My best pick out of the entire soundtrack is a piece known as Veiled in Black, which is tense, fast-paced, and suitable for almost any tough battle you experience in the world of Final Fantasy XV. It also has that same distinct personality you associate with the game, which is a trait from nearly every entry of the Final Fantasy series. You almost always immediately remember that one battle track that speaks volumes to the game's experience. Take a listen real quick and you'll feel exactly what I'm talking about.
I really have to say, I think this soundtrack is awesome. I think that a lot of the musical tracks that are included, whether you're in battle or just exploring the worlds or watching a cutscene related to the main story, the soundtrack is so good and really works well together with the visuals and everything that's happening on screen. Before I knew it, I had plenty of the tracks on my iPod. It was really awesome just to listen back to some of these awesome tracks that not only got me hyped, but also really kind of worked well with some of the different things that I was doing inside the game. Whether I was exploring the different lands around me and seeing all these majestic creatures, or if I was kind of lurking around in some of the different dungeons and caves that you could find throughout the entirety of the game world. The music just works well with what's happening on screen, and it just sets a tone and sets a mood that I think is absolutely phenomenal. Now, something that we have to talk about that is a little bit more unique to this game as opposed to other entries in the series is the downloadable content.
Final Fantasy XV is one of the few entries of the franchise that can benefit from having downloadable content. In its first run of DLC, you have 3 episodes based on each of the guys within Noctis' group, as well as some additional multiplayer content called Comrades. The single-player DLC is interesting if you want to know more about some of the events outside of what the main game shows you, including stuff that happens before the beginning and during certain events of the game's story. It doesn't always hit its mark with some aspects, but with each episode of the DLC, it does give you something unique to complement the story, as well as give more context to certain events and character motivations. Luckily for us, additional DLC episodes in the future will give players even more to chew on with some of their favorite characters that may have not gotten a lot of shine beforehand in the main story.
In addition to that, we also got a little bit of supplemental material that came out with some patches and updates that kind of add more to some of the different chapters of the game. Most specifically, we have to talk about is Chapter 13, which is probably the worst chapter in the game by, universal standards. A lot of people seem to really dislike that chapter, myself included. But one of the things that really kind of rubbed everybody the wrong way about Chapter 13 was because it stuck out like a sore thumb. You had these stealth elements that weren't really all that great and kind of was like, really kind of took down the tone of the entire game and really stopped the momentum of some of the action that was going on. However, with some of the patches and the updates, they really kind of upped the ante and changed up a few things here and there to kind of get you moving along back in some of the crazier elements of what was going on with the main story. In addition to that though, there's one other thing I want to mention which really doesn't factor into my review, and that's the Comrades DLC. If you don't know what that is, Comrades is the multiplayer element of Final Fantasy XV that allows you and a bunch of other players to go on these different hunts, and you kind of fight different monsters and complete certain quests that are kind of similar to some of the things you do in the main game, but are much more geared towards multiplayer, especially with the difficulty of some of the monsters that you face. Now, in my personal opinion and my own personal experience, I don't like the Comrades multiplayer. I could have dealt without it. I would have rather taken a single-player expansion for the main story or any other stuff to add on to the story rather than the multiplayer. I think that it works well for what it does, but it just feels like such an afterthought, and it feels like something that just doesn't go well with the rest of the game. I really wanted to see more single-player DLC that I felt like I would enjoy a lot more, that was more telling me stories about the specific characters or introducing new elements and new characters that weren't included in the main game. We're going to eventually get more of that as time goes on. I know that the Season 2 DLC content is going to include more episodes based on other characters that you kind of run into throughout the entirety of the main story, which I love, which I think is going to be great. And in addition to that, let's talk about Final Fantasy XV Windows Edition, which is a whole nother version of the game that includes all the DLC that came beforehand, but you're allowed to also play the game in 4K on the PC. Don't get me wrong, the game already looks phenomenal as it is, but I saw Final Fantasy XV running on a PC at 4K, and my god, that game looks even more gorgeous than what it already does. If you have the PC to run it, I really highly encourage you to pick up Final Fantasy XV Windows Edition, because to me, that'll be the definitive visual version of the game if you really want those visuals to pop out to you and look phenomenal. But if you don't have a PC and you just have a console and you just want to experience Final Fantasy XV in its entirety, you can still do so on the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One. It may not be visually as good as what's on the PC, but it doesn't matter. You're really only going to be playing this game for the story that it tells. And with that being said, that's my thoughts on Final Fantasy XV. I think it's a really epic game. It's a game that has a story behind the story, you know, with all of its crazy development stuff that went on for many, many years, going from Versus 13 to 15. But for what we got at the end of its development cycle, I feel like it's a great game, even though not everything really hits its mark. I still feel like this is a game that every fan of JRPGs or just role-playing games in general, or even Final Fantasy fans need to play. It's very fun. I think that it tells a great story about friendship, about brotherhood, as well as also about coming of age. It's something that I felt like it was really special by the time I actually played it, having followed it for so many years, and I really enjoyed the product that we actually got by the time it was in our hands to play. Anyway guys, thank you for watching this video review. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my fresh looking suit right here. Try to get dressed up for the occasion. Look a little bit like Noctis and the rest of the guys from LUCIS. But either way, make sure you guys leave a like on this video, comment down below with some of your favorite characters from Final Fantasy XV or your favorite Final Fantasy game in general, and make sure that you subscribe to the channel. And don't forget everybody, I'm on Patreon. If you guys can, if you love this content and you want to see more great stuff done by me, make sure you guys check the links down below and support my Patreon. Every single tier level has a bunch of different rewards that you guys are definitely going to love. With that being said, I will talk to you guys again very soon. Peace out, stay epic everybody.
Hey, thanks a ton everyone for watching this video review. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys can, show some love by subscribing to the YouTube channel, as well as also leaving a comment down below. Don't forget to check out some of my other videos, including my other previous reviews and other vlogs that I post up here weekly on the channel. I will talk to you guys again real soon. Peace out, and stay epic everybody.